Hello, hello. Welcome back to Mentally a Badass. Today I have a special guest. His name is Kevin, CSO founder and host of Next Level University, a global top 100 self improvement podcast with over 1,800 episodes and a reach of 1 million plus in 170 countries. After a life altering brush with suicide, Kevin went all in on his dream of becoming a full time podcaster and entrepreneur. With a heart driven, no BS approach to self improvement, he's here to share his journey with us and how he helps others level up. So, welcome to the podcast.
Justine, thank you so very much for having me. I appreciate, as I told you behind the scenes, I appreciate the wonderful introduction. My goal is to hopefully not lessen it and underperform too much. That's the goal.
No, you won't. And I promise. And plus, you're on a mental health podcast. So,
That's true.
my goodness, we're all accepting. So we're going to just jump right into it. And I'm super excited to, dig into your story. I mean, this whole part of this podcast is to talk about your past and what you went through to become the person you are today. So can you take us back to a time when you were struggling with depression and suicidal thoughts? What was that period of your life like?
Yeah, I was somebody who, from the outside looking in, I had achieved a lot of quote unquote success. I had a high paying job. I had a sports car. My girlfriend was a model. I was in the best shape of my life because I was getting ready for a bodybuilding show. Quite literally, Justine, life, love, health, and wealth. It looked like I had all of them. But I realized that the reason I was trying to acquire so many external things is because I thought it would fix internal voids that I just didn't know how else to fix. So my girlfriend at the time ended up leaving me because I was depressed and I was anxious. And it's anybody who struggled with depression, anxiety, you know that when it's hard to pour into yourself, it's really hard to pour into other people. And that's kind of what I was experiencing at the time. So my girlfriend left me. And when she left me, I thought to myself, well, maybe I just haven't made enough money yet. Not, I'm going to work on myself. Not, I'm going to become more self-aware. My thought was, well, I just haven't achieved the right level of success and I need to go do that. So the next year I ended up just working my face off as much as humanly possible, putting my head down. And I spent 10 months living on the road because my company that I worked for, a lot of our work included traveling. So we get to the end of that year and I opened my final pay stub and I made $100,000 at 26 with no college degree, which quite literally was a dream come true for me. But it didn't change the way I felt about me. Yes, circumstantially, I had more money in the bank and I had more certainty. And those are very valuable things. I'm not discrediting those. But I was no more confident. I didn't have any higher of self-worth. I didn't feel any better about myself. I was still wildly insecure. So I realized that for most of my life, I lived unconsciously. I don't really know why I do any of the things I do. The opposite of unconscious is hyperconscious. So in 2017, I started a podcast called the Hyperconscious Podcast, and that's where this whole thing kind of evolved from. But as you know, in the beginning, there's not exactly a line out the door of people saying, Justine, this podcast is a great idea. Let me give you just a bunch of money so you can do it full time, and this is your new job. That's just not how it works, unfortunately. So I had to keep going to this job that I absolutely started to hate. I fell in love with podcasting. I wanted to do that more. I started to hate this job. I want to do it less. I don't want to travel. I don't want to live out of my suitcase. I don't want to be away for weeks at a time. So I start calling out of work and I start showing up late and I start leaving early and just not being a good employee. And it all led to one day I woke up in a hotel room 6 hours from where I lived at the time. That's where we were working that week. My alarm clock went off at 5 or 5:15 and I sat up. I slid to the edge of the bed. I was lacing up my work boots as I had done 1,000 times before. But the best way to explain it, Justine, is that morning it was like there was 10 televisions on in my head at the same time. And every single one was just on a different station. And one is saying you're stuck here forever. People like you do not get jobs like this. Never mind, leave them behind. Do not screw this up. You are so lucky to have this opportunity. Do not mess this up. That was one. If you ever did leave, if you ever had the courage or stupidity, depending on what it is, to leave, what would your friends think? What would your family think? And then the biggest thing was, if you did leave, what would you do? What would you do with your life? This podcast thing doesn't seem super realistic. So it was in that moment where I thought to myself, well, if I was just to take my life, I would take all my problems with me and I wouldn't have to fix any of these things. And luckily, I have very supportive people in my life, and I reached out to one of my friends who's now my business partner, and he helped me through that, and he created a light at the end of the tunnel for me. And then I ended up leaving my job a couple months later and then trying to figure out how to be an entrepreneur, which somehow was harder than everything else in the past.
So I want to say, I think we're living the same life.
Okay, right on.
So, everything that you said, I saw a lot of me. I have a similar journey. I didn't make like a lot of money and such, but have experienced a moment where on the outside it looks like I have everything. I used to work for Disney, so that's people's like ideal dream job. I was doing YouTube. I guess I just looked cool on social. I don't know. But on the outside it looked like I was cool and such. But then and I've had like significant others that would leave me when times would get, tough with mental health. So I totally can understand like the feeling you felt when someone left you, and then it just feels like it just feels like everything is like crashing down. And I also personally experienced feeling like you have to have a lot of money in the account. You have to be like super crazy, like rich, successful. And of course, success can mean a lot of things depending on who you're talking to. So I just want to just put that on the table, of course. But, society makes like success look like having $100,000 in your account. And then you measure your success based off of what you're looking at your bank account. And so, and then so you just keep going, going, going. You think you have everything. You said you had a girlfriend that's supermodel. You had like a fancy car, and then you realize you're like, I'm still not happy. So then you just keep going and going and going, and you're like, what do I gotta do to feel like I'm satisfied with my life? So you have that problem where you feel unsatisfied, and of course that can stem from childhood trauma and how you felt and how your caregiver treated you, and that's like a whole other story. But I've personally experienced that as well. And so when I was just listening to you and everything that you pointed at, I was like, yep, I experienced that.
Mm.
Yes, I experienced that. I mean, I experienced things on different scales, of course, but what you said that kind of like made me feel like I almost cried. Well, not cried, but like I'm very empathetic. So when you said that you felt trapped and you felt like, well, if I can't make podcasting a full time and I'm just trapped in this job, then what's the point? So you think like the only way out is suicide. And I relate to that in a way because I wanted to make YouTube full time, and I want to use social media full time. But I had to stay with the company, a job that I didn't want to do anymore because you naturally have to pay bills.
Of course.
So
Of
so
course.
that's where I just felt stuck in life. And I was just like listening in the room, and I'm just like trying to talk myself out of, taking my own life, and just saying, we go through hard times, and I know something's going to come from me. I know something's at the end of the tunnel. But there is moments that I of course wanted to take my life, and I had to go on FMLA for work, meaning that like I have bipolar, so that's like I'm diagnosed with that. And so I was able to get FMLA. So basically, I was able to call in 400 hours a year without, getting fired. But I was not. I was like taking like at least one day off per week. I was showing up late. I was leaving early. And our time, I lost over like $2,000 in 1 year because of all my call outs. So when you were saying that you couldn't, get yourself to work, and just like I said, everything that you said, calling in more often, going there late, leaving there early, I was like, are you telling my story too?
I guess. I
Yeah.
guess. The hard thing though is for me, the reason I was showing up late and doing that, it wasn't really due to anything mental health. Maybe it was, but I couldn't recognize it.
Mhm.
For me, it was the fact that I just didn't care anymore.
Yeah, true.
I just at the time I was making, it depended on where I was working, but I was making anywhere from $60 an hour to $120 an hour depending on where I was working. And I was a foreman at my company, so I'd be running these jobs, and the people that worked on my team would be so pissed at me
Mhm.
because if we leave the day 4 hours early, everybody just lost like $400. And I was
Yeah.
like, I don't care. I don't care about the money. I don't want to do it. Deal with it. We're leaving. I don't care. Doesn't matter. That's where I was. I don't know. Maybe it was more mental health related than I actually understood.
Mhm.
But a lot of it for me was I was out. I accomplished the goal. I'm
Mhm.
on to the next goal, and this goal is not the goal anymore. So I just don't want to invest in it.
It's so That is so true. And like what I the whole mental health thing, I mean, at the end of the day, I truly believe that everything stems from mental health in some way or another because of our brains and our thought processes and the way we think. So you've already reached that goal and you're like, I just want to get to the next one because you also from what the beginning of what you were saying is that you have a challenge of feeling satisfied. So once you reach that goal, and you need to like you yourself need to go to the next level, hence your podcast. I just realized what I said and now everything's making sense. so so yeah, you need to go above that, and when you see you're not going above that, you're just like, I don't even care anymore, like what's the point, right? So yeah, I feel like our and I've had a slight similarity of that. I mean, the job that I had was more like hospitality customer service based. So I was trying to, I achieved my goal of becoming full time at Disney. But I was trying to work in a job where it wasn't like a customer service guest facing. Like I'm a creative, and I know I liked also like marketing and client service, or I'm just like in that world. I'm not like meant to just be like taking calls all day and having being yelled at by guests. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
So that job that I was given was literally just to keep me with the company, so I don't move back to New Jersey. So so I moved to Florida from New Jersey because I had the opportunity. So I just took whatever I can get. And
Yeah.
I thought I was just gonna be there for like no more than a year, get to my next job, but I was stuck there for literally like 4 years. And when I was actually slowly getting out, like I was going around networking, I was getting somewhere, the pandemic happened.
Mm.
So, of course, as I was making these connections, I'm like, okay, I'm getting somewhere, because it's all about networking in that company. And yes, the pandemic happened. Obviously, everything's on hold with hiring and just really anything. We're all just trying to survive. So, that's where I'm in the universe. I'm just like, why? Like, what is going on? But then, not to make this about me, it's all about you, of course. But then something something happened to me where it got me out of that, and that was so right now I'm a full-time social media manager and I freelance. So that's what I do full time. And so I put a gig on Fiverr and it just blew up overnight. Well, it took 3 months sitting there, but then I woke up one morning and it just went viral. And I had so many people in my inbox asking me to do their socials. And I was like, I freaked out. I was like, oh my God, I've never done this before. Like, what if I fail? Right. So
Yeah.
the reason I mentioned that is because I want to ask you next, what was that moment that you had when it was like, okay, it's time to get out? I know you said you had a business partner, but I want to talk more about that actual moment that you were like, I'm out.
It was terrifying, Justine. It was absolutely terrifying. I was in the gym with my business partner, who was just my friend at the time. And I had already started, I don't know, I'd already started with a conversation with my employer because they said, hey, Kev, there's a job coming up. We need you to run it. It's going to be at this time. It's going to be at this time. It's going to be at this time. And I said, yeah, cool, I'll do it. And they messed up the schedule. We had a really big, either a podcast interview or a meeting with a potential client. And I told them, I said, I know you want to change the schedule. I can't do it. I have prior obligations.
Mhm.
And it got to the point where I was kind of forced to choose between I'm going to do this podcast thing or I'm going to do my quote unquote real job. And that was the day where I told him, I said, I'm not coming in. I'm done. So you do what you got to do. I'm not coming in. I'm going to go do this other thing. Then they ended up messaging me back and saying, all right, this obviously isn't going to work. Let's go our separate ways. And it was this weird feeling of one, a weight was lifted off of my shoulders like I cannot even explain. The fact that now I know I get to sleep in my bed whenever I want was one of the most real feelings ever. And then like 5 microseconds later, the pressure of now I have no idea how I'm going to pay my bills was put onto my shoulders. And here's the interesting thing. I had a really good relationship with my company. And they called me later and they said, hey, Kev, if you want, you can stick around for another month and we'll put you on as many jobs as possible so you can try to make as much money as possible. And I could have made, I probably could have made $10,000 if I just stayed and worked another month. And I said, no, I'm good. I'm doing this podcast thing. I don't want to do it. I'm out completely. And it was absolutely terrifying. Yeah, it was one of the most scary things ever, but it was also one of the most relieving things ever. But Justine, if I'm being honest, I think there was a piece of me that was just naive. It's like, yeah, I'm an entrepreneur. This is going to work. And yeah, it worked, but it was way, 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 way harder than I thought it was going to be, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. How old were you when you decided to become an entrepreneur?
28. 27, 28.
Oh, okay. I was 26. I'm 29.
Okay, right on,
Wow.
right on. You and I are very similar.
Yeah, I got to do her in her 20s. And I'm just out of curiosity, I don't even know what part you live in. Like, what part are you from?
I live in New Hampshire. Funny story. Most of the work I did was in New Jersey. So I worked in Mountain Lakes, right? Mountain Lakes. I worked in Parsippany. I worked all over the place in New Jersey.
So you were mentioning the whole like naive feeling, and you know what's crazy is that you kind of just like know what you feel like your purpose is and what you're meant for, and you knew deep down that you're like, I need to be an entrepreneur. And part of being an entrepreneur is having that like determination of growing and growing and just personal development, and just like, the sky is the limit and such. So it's really interesting, like entrepreneurship values, and then also just like mental health. But that's like a whole other thing as well. And then there was something else that you said that I wanted to touch on. Okay, you were saying how entrepreneurship is way harder than being an employee. So I 100% agree with you. That's why I wanted to touch on this. So I feel like it's like definitely a different type of heart. I mean, living the entrepreneur life, to a lot of people look at it and be like, oh, wow, they have it so easy. They get to wake up whenever they want, to get to do this, they get to do that. And yeah, that's a pro. I really like the idea that I can get up 10 o'clock and I don't have to go to a job, or unless I have like meetings, of course. But honestly, like being a business owner between my social media business and Mentally a Badass, because it's also a clothing line as well. I don't know if you knew that. So yeah, it's also an apparel brand. It's a podcast and apparel brand.
Nice.
Yeah. So the apparel side, I have a partner with that. So just like the whole like having two businesses, and then like, me being an employee since, of course, when I was 16, and it's two different worlds completely. And it's just like, it's just different types of stress, because you have to depend on yourself to make money.
Yeah.
Like just because you're working, it doesn't mean that you're guaranteed money in your bank account. Like
Yeah.
for me, I don't make money on this podcast. Like I don't like make a dime and such. I mean, so yes, I don't. But I'm actually curious to know where it started with you when it came to like making money. Like I'm really intrigued. I want to learn.
I was very broke. So it probably took a year and a half or 2 years. So I started in 2017, then I went full time in 2018. And I don't think I started working with clients until like the end of 2018 or 2019. And I went to my business partner and I said, hey, brother, I am very broke. And at this point, I was like $30,000 in credit card debt with no way to pay. I need to start making money. And he said, all right, cool. What you should start doing is start coaching people for free. And I said, no. I don't know if you heard what I said. I need to start making money. I can't do anything for free. I've been doing this for free long enough. And he said, well, Kev, you have never coached in this capacity. You have to build relationships. You have to build belief. And honestly, there might not be anybody that's going to pay you to coach right now because you've never done it. I was like, okay, fair. Those are all fair points. So I reached out to 5 people that I knew listened to the podcast. And I just sent them a message, and it would just say, hey, Justine, I know you listen to the podcast. I've been thinking about coaching. I don't have any certifications. I don't have any experience. I would love to coach you for free for 2 months every week. And at the end of the 2 months, if you want to continue working together, we can. If not, no worries. There's no strings attached. What do you think? And all 5 people said yes. Everybody was like, yeah, okay, cool, let's do it. So I coached everybody for free for a couple months. And then at the end of the 2 months, I said, what do you think of $50 a call? And then everybody said yes. So I went from making $0 a week to $250 a week. And that was quite literally life-changing money for me. And then I got more clients, and then $50 went to 75. And as I had more demand, my prices went up. And then eventually something weird happened. When I was like 300 episodes in, somebody said, hey, I want you to produce my podcast. And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't even know what that means. And they said, you've done 300 episodes. You know way more than I do. So that was another piece of our business that is one of the bigger pieces of our business now is I help podcasters. And that's just a weird meta thing that I have the privilege of doing. So it was really that. It was one-on-one coaching was really how the whole thing got rolling. That's how we started making money. And then as we got more clients, we were able to invest, and we got a studio, and we would travel to interview people and go to events and new gear and new equipment. And then we hired team, and that's kind of just, that's kind of how it's worked.
Wow. Okay. So I'm sure you were seeing my face this whole time
I
because,
assume your experience was exactly the same.
but you know what's crazy too is this is actually insane. And honestly, like I guess I'm a big believer on law of attraction universe. So this is insane. Anyway, so you were talking about the coaching, right? I literally, people told me, they're like, Justine, you'll be great as like a life coach. And then I was like, I already have so much else going on in my life. Like I have my social media business, I have my podcast, like I have so much. I don't got time to build a life coaching business, right? And then I'm like, oh, there's also like so much competition. Like, all of those thoughts went through my head. And then but I was like, oh well, I need to be certified. So I was like looking up certifications and such. And then I was like, well, maybe I can like, my niche can be like mental health, like life coaching and such, because I mean, I'm not obviously a licensed mental health professional. I do have a background in psychology. Like in college, I have a degree in that, but I never went to the point where I became like a therapist. But I do like, apparently I'm actually like really good at helping people when it comes to their mental health. Like I've had people even like reach out to me, just like, yeah, and such. So I was like, okay, well, how can I do this? Like, who's gonna want to give me money, right? And I was like, well, maybe if I do like some free ones, I reach out
Yeah.
to my followers. So that's when you were saying that, I'm like,
I respect it though. I feel like it's the best. It's the best thing in the world. If you feel stuck and you want to try something, but you don't have the belief that you can do it for free. Just do it for free. Because this is the interesting thing. When you offer something for free, nobody expects it's going to be good.
true.
And when it
Yeah.
is good, it blows them away. It blows them away. And then you get belief and you get experience and you have self-trust and you oh wow, maybe I actually am good at this thing. And then you can kind of take it from there. And I love it. I love the fact that you did it for free, because I wouldn't have done it if I didn't do it for free. I would not be here if I didn't start by doing it for free. So I always advise that.
Have you ever read the book The Secret or
That
watched
yeah,
the movie?
in like 2000, I think I read it in 2018. Back in the day. So yeah, I'm a very big believer in the law of attraction and energy and synchronicity
Mhm.
and all of that. I'm very big as well into that.
Yeah, I saw the actual, like, I think it was on Netflix. I saw the movie on Netflix, I think in like 2019 or 2020, around there. Or yeah. And then I was in the library and I saw the book and I was like, oh, it's a book too? Like, I didn't know it was a book. So I was like, okay, let me read it. And I've been reading it like a chapter every night. And I'm just like, I've been in the best mood. I've been in the best mood these last couple of weeks. And I, you know, I struggle with, like, obviously intrusive thoughts and negative thoughts with just mental health problems. And so I'm just like, I keep trying to recognize that and trying to change, my thought process, because I don't want to attract bad things
Yeah.
in my life. So before I got on with you, I was having some struggles with like thinking like negative things about and such, but now I just feel a lot better. And yesterday I actually interviewed a woman from India who does like meditation like classes full time and yoga, and she taught me so much. Like, when you think of meditation, you think of like you're there for like 15 minutes and you're just like, like, yeah. But
Yeah.
anyway, so I said to her, I was like, people give a piece of advice that do like 5 minutes to start out if you can't do like 15 minutes. And I asked her, I'm like, well, do you agree with that? And she was like, no. And I was like, what? And she said, because she's like, no, when I say meditating, like practicing that, is in reality, you're meditating throughout the whole day because your focus is your breath. And I was like,
Mm,
that is so true. And so it's like you don't really have to be setting, I mean, it's of course recommended because it's great for you, but it's not necessarily have to be just sitting down for 15 minutes and meditating. It's just practicing to do it throughout your day so you can stay centered and not have all this anxiety and just, be the best that you can be. So yeah, I found that very fascinating. So I thought I'd
mm,
share that with you. And now
I
my list,
appreciate it.
yeah, now my listeners gonna hear it twice. So so yeah, so and honestly, it looks also like your business partner has been such a backbone for you. So that's awesome. Is that the was his name? Is that the your co-host?
Yeah, Alan. Alan and
Alan.
I, yeah, we went to middle school together
Mhm.
and we played spin the bottle with the popular girls in middle school. That's how far back we go. And then we went to high school together, but Alan's probably the most intelligent human I've ever met. He is incredibly intelligent, genius for sure. I was a jock. I was one of the captains of the baseball team, so we didn't get along super well in high school. And then after we graduated, he went off to a really good college. I worked at the gas station and tried to figure out my life. And then after I had it was before I had the suicidal ideations, but when I started getting a little bit more into growth and self awareness and self improvement, him and I got really close. And he was the first guest on my podcast. So it all worked out very, very, very nicely. And it's interesting, Justine, because we're under a lot of pressure and we're under a lot of stress and there's a lot of decisions to be made and it's hard. It's very, very, very hard. But I can probably count on one hand the amount of times we've actually had like a real argument. It's very, very, very rare. We get along so incredibly well, even though we are essentially polar opposites. So that's a very, very beneficial thing. Then can I add something quick to the purpose piece?
Of course.
I used to think that I had trouble finding my purpose. And in
Mhm.
general, a lot of people will say, how do you find your purpose? I think, to your point, I think a lot of us know what our purpose is. We just don't know what the vehicle is. My
Yeah.
purpose is not to be a podcaster.
Mhm.
My purpose is to help people raise awareness, to be the type of person I needed. The vehicle is the podcast. The vehicle is rap. I write raps occasionally. The vehicle might
Nice.
be speaking or coaching.
Yeah.
The purpose is to be the type of person that I needed when I was at my lowest point, really. So I just throw that out there for anybody who might be struggling with what their purpose is. I think we get caught up where we say, well, every time I go to the beach, I see all the litter and I see the pollution and it just bums me out. I feel like I'd really love to be the type of person that cleans up the beaches, but I don't know how I could ever make money doing that or turn it into a business. You're not saying that's not your purpose. You're just saying you don't believe in the vehicle yet, and that's totally normal. So I want to throw that out there.
That is honestly that is so true. And you're so right because like deep down, and we share like pretty much the same purpose when it comes to like helping others and such. And yeah, you're right, like the podcast is a vehicle. I didn't even think of mentioning that. And I mean, I know what the whole, some people may not even know what it means when you say vehicle, but I do. And I didn't even think about that. I was like, oh yeah, the podcast is a vehicle. And then also my Instagram, like mentally a badass Instagram is a vehicle. And then like the apparel line, yeah, so I have all of these vehicles. Wow, I got a lot of cars.
You got a
Um
lot of cars. Yeah, you need a big garage when you got that many cars. But that's the beauty of it. And then you'll kind of know if you start veering out of alignment when you're doing things that don't lead to the purpose. There's
yeah.
there's a lot of ways, Justine, I could be more quote unquote successful. They're
Mhm.
just not aligned with what I want to do. I don't want to do it that way. There's many ways,
True.
many, many, many ways we could be more successful. It's just not aligned with the purpose.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that as well. I love having like these conversations and have like, oh, like a bunch of aha moments.
Of course.
Yeah, yeah. So, I'm trying to. Can you give me an example? I don't know if it's completely relevant with this conversation, but like, what's something that you know that you could be making a lot of money on besides, of course, that job that you had? Like, what do you see? Oh, I can make a lot of money on this. I can really, monetize, capitalize on this. But it's like, oh, it's not my thing.
Yeah, I mean, so we have the opportunity to have like a lot of guests on, big
Mhm.
guests, and do like sponsorships and ads and affiliates. And I've never done one. I've never done an ad. I've never done a sponsorship. I will never do one. You could offer me $1 million right now. I wouldn't do it. It's just not, it's not in alignment with our brand. And then at one point, one of Alan's mentors essentially said to him, if I gave you $1 million, how much could you turn it into? And it was kind of saying, if I give you $1 million, I'm going to own a piece of your business. And Alan more than I, because I didn't really have that much say, but Alan turned that down. And we were broke. We were so broke. That $1 million would have been everything. So it's just that type of, I could probably make like a high ticket course on podcasting. I could probably charge way more than I charge for coaching. I don't want to. I want to help people. It's not about, yes, I like things and I like money because money is certainty and money is opportunity and it gives you options. Yes. But not at the expense of other people. I don't want it to
Yeah.
be at the expense of someone else. I think that's kind of
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And when you were saying that you were offered, like, let's say $1 million or like a really big guest on your podcast, but it just didn't align, so you had to say no to that, even if you had that big guest and it could have given you like exposure and such. I've
yeah.
had something similar that happened to me. I have like this, it's like this agency that reaches out to me a lot via email with like potential guests, and I read through it and then I look the guest up and I'm like, it doesn't really align what mentally about is about. And like yeah, they have like a, they're like a name, and I mean they're not like a name like 5 million followers, but they, you, if you google them you'll find them, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
So but it's like, okay, like I could obviously get some exposure here and such, but also I'm like, why would I do that? Like I'm not gonna be like, I'm not gonna say, I don't know, I'll say sell out or whatever, but I'm not gonna like do something and it just doesn't feel right. I'm not gonna like interview somebody if it doesn't fully align with the whole brand of mentally a
Of
badass.
course.
And just bringing back to like where we met with the whole pod match thing, and I'm really new to pod match, to be honest with you. You're my first from pod match.
Nice.
Just letting you know on that. So yeah, you're my first pod match guest experience. And yeah, so when I was first on it, I went through of course all the education and such. And then the owner, the founder was saying like, if you get like a guest in front of your face and they just don't align, like don't feel bad, like click pass. And I'm like, I'm glad he said that, because it really got me thinking, because some moments I'm just like, yeah, I just want to like talk to everybody, this and that. And like the people they match me with, like they align somehow, some way,
Mhm, mhm.
but it's like not like mentally a badass. So like the whole idea of this podcast is people who come on here need to have some type of personal life story that made them who they are today, to one, show vulnerability, because this whole part of this podcast is to have so many conversations about where we've been and things that people don't want to talk about, to make it so normal that when someone wants to go and talk about their mental health or they're depressed or childhood trauma, it's normal. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't feel like taboo anymore. So that's like the whole point of this podcast, as well as the clothing line. Though there's some like sayings on there, it's like people probably like wouldn't say in real life, but anyway, that's a whole other thing. But yeah, so when you came to me, I think someone else I talked to, or
Laura,
yeah,
the
Laura.
wonderful Laura on our team. Yeah.
When she reached out, I was reading everything. I was like, and so I looked at your account and I was like, oh, okay, cool. He has a story. Because I always love to talk to people who've been through like, pretty much been through hell, and it's just like living, their dream now, because, that gives people hope. Like when people listen to this, they're like, okay, he went through and he felt like there was no way out, but then he found that way out. So it's kind of just like, being patient with that. And then your time will come. And that's like, I see so many people on social media feeling like there's nothing that's going to help them, and then they feel like they need to go and it's the way out. And it just makes me so sad, because I believe that if you are on this earth and you are still alive, you have you have a reason that you're here, because I feel like there were so many not chances, times where I could have, died, but I didn't. And I'm just like, okay, it gives me more of a reason to stay. Cause I'm like, okay, I need to be here for a reason, right?
Yeah.
And so, and same for you. And I just like love how, we connected with like, just pretty much literally having like almost like the exact same
Mm.
the exact same life, or we're living the same life. I honestly think that like people have their seasons and such, and you and I were like going through like, we have negative season, positive season, and then we're just kind of in the same pattern right now. So I just thought that was really cool. What tools, practices, or habits do you use to maintain your mental health today? And then also, what advice would you give someone who is currently struggling with depression or contemplating suicide?
The habits and stuff for me is one is fitness. I
Yeah,
have noticed a direct correlation between when I'm going to the gym and anxiety.
yeah,
Depression is not really something I deal with now. It's occasional, it's much less than it was before.
mhm,
Anxiety is much less too, but I still experience anxiety. And when I'm going to the gym consistently, I feel way less anxious. So that's a big one for me.
mhm,
Getting enough sleep is super important for me because it just helps me operate at a higher energy and a higher frequency.
mhm,
I don't really meditate anymore. I don't really journal anymore. But if I'm going through a season, to your point, where I feel like I need it, I'll throw that in there. So the habits for me are just staying focused on the stuff that I know will fulfill me.
yeah,
It's that. It's that's one of the hardest things when it comes to mental health is when you feel down or you feel bad, you don't want to do the things that you know you'd be fulfilled by doing. That's why it's such a hard cycle. So
mhm,
the advice I would give is don't worry about doing it all. Don't worry about going from where you are to feeling the best you ever have. Break everything down into little, small things. If making your bed makes you feel better, just do that. It doesn't mean you have to make your bed, go for a run, go to the gym, reach out to someone, do this, read a book. You don't have to do all that. Just focus on one little thing that can turn the tide, one little thing that can put you in a new direction. And then if you are at rock bottom and you're really struggling, find someone to reach out to. You can reach out to me, you can reach out to Justine, I'm sure my stuff will be in the show note. You can email me, you can whatever, send me a message. I'm more than happy to listen and help you find the help that you feel like would be best for you. But I think that's it. Reaching out to someone that you trust, reaching out to someone where you feel like you can be vulnerable because you're not alone, even though you might feel like it. There are people out there that want to help. There are people out there that want to support you. And I promise that there are people out there that are grateful you're in the world, even though sometimes it doesn't feel that.
yeah. That's really good advice, and definitely the main thing is like reaching out to someone, because people get scared that they'll be judged because they could have been judged by other people, or they could have saw other people be judged. Because one thing I do like to mention is that it doesn't necessarily mean like, okay, someone judged you in the past, but if you like see it, your brain takes that in like subconsciously, and then you like develop like, okay, well, if it happened to this person, it's going to happen to me. But then and then our brains just focus on the negative. Like that's like our like, since like times where we in the caves and such and how to survive, it just protects you. But just always just like constantly reinsuring that like, we're a safe place. And I've been told that when people listen to this podcast, that I sound very like healing, I've been told, which
Okay, I
is
dig
like,
that.
which is really really nice. I'm like, oh, that makes me feel so happy. Just being a safe place. And honestly, you definitely are a safe place. When I get onto these podcast episodes, people that I don't know, I'm always anxious because I mean, I every guest I've had, no one's ever been mean. Like it's never, ever, ever happened to me. Everyone is always so kind to me. But it's just previous, like outside the podcast, people have mistreated me growing up. So that's kind of how I bring it onto here, which is not good. But you are just so easy to talk to. And then just like seeing your, like as soon as like we went on today, like your energy levels, I was like, okay, this is gonna be a great episode. Like this is going to be awesome. Like I'm super excited. I don't want this to end, even though it has to, because people are going to listen to like 5 hours of us talking. So I have to
I
like watch for
appreciate it.
the time.
I
So
appreciate it.
yeah. So now I want you to talk about your podcast. I'm going to put your podcast, of course, in a description so they can see it. But also, there's like a more like this section on Spotify that I can add your podcast in there. So it just makes it easier for them to just click more like this, and they can just go from there. But anyway, let's talk about it.
I dig it. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's called Next Level University. We do an episode every single day on health, wealth, life, and love. I've been very in shape, but very miserable. I've had a good amount of money, but been very lonely. And eventually it got to the point where I kind of want to figure out how to have everything. I want to have the best of everything because I think that's going to help me be the most fulfilled. So we talk a lot about stuff like we talked about today, relationships, money, all that stuff. Heart driven, but no BS, holistic self improvement for dream chasers. That is our jam. We're on all the podcast platforms. We're on YouTube, and it's very similar conversations to the wonderful one that we had the pleasure of having today.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for donating your time to us with giving us a lot of valuable information. And for everyone who's listening, make sure you go check out his podcast and his Instagram and such. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day.